Race the
Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Mystic Trainwreck podcast. This is your host, Rob Randolph. I have with me, as always, or just maybe this time, Starwitch, Crass, Joy.
Yeah. Hi.
Hi. And Chris Lee down there, or up there.
Hi.
How's it going?
Good.
I'm at this weird angle for no particular reason. Production values, I suppose. Anyway, we were just talking about how history is not real.
Or maybe it isn't.
Maybe it isn't.
The question.
The question. And so I hit record because that sounded like something.
Yeah.
Well, we started getting into it. So, Chris, you
Yes.
said the words you said were, "I'm starting to think maybe history is not real."
Yeah, I have a real deep suspicion now, as to, you know, even a more flexible version of reality, just let's say colloquial version of like, hey, did that really happen? Right? That's a question you could ask. Did that really happen? Were there enough local observers to create that moment in time? Something simple like that. What got me thinking about it was the idea that you can basically erase knowledge
Yeah.
by just not talking about it for a long time.
Mhm.
And how long depends on the knowledge and whatever. In politics, for example,
Mhm.
you can erase stuff pretty quickly.
Ooh, every day.
Yeah. You just have to wait for news cycles to be born and live their life cycle and die.
Mm-hmm.
And in the same way, if you don't talk about something for a couple generations, say,
Sure.
Yep.
well, did it really happen? What are the what you know, I don't want to devolve this into an epistemological discussion too much because that's a big topic, what reality is, right? But is there any definition of reality that we could agree on that would make history kind of real?
Well, yeah. I mean, insofar as we construct reality out of narrative, like always, like we're always narratizing what's going on.
Right. So if that's
Oh,
the fundamental fabric of reality, right, then I mean, history
then
is not any more or less real than anything else. Well, I mean, history is a particular discipline. It's a remembrance of things that have happened publicly that consensus reality can hold on to and manipulate and experience the consequences of, say.
right, but let's not. I think it's relevant to bring up the proverb that the until the lions write it down, the hunters are always going to win. Like, you heard that proverb? It's
No.
an African
Is that a
proverb.
Rob Randolph proverb?
No, no. I'm badly referencing an African proverb about the fact that humans create histories, whether they're whoever's writing the history down is the winner. Essentially, they
Sure.
always create a narrative in which, yeah, we made it through because X reason, and this is why we deserved to make it through, right? And that's either going to blame, you could say, like a God ordained that we make it through, or you could say we made it through because we built a boat and sailed here, or you could say, we made it through because we're genetically superior, or you could say we made it through because we killed these people over there and
Sure.
they were going to kill us first, and so
Yeah. This seems to be like the general, again, fabric of reality kind of thing, right? That we as a community create, our own realities. There's nothing specific to history there, right?
no, that's the thing.
Yeah, I'm curious about this construct that has come about in our organism.
Mhm.
What does a history serve? It has effects, you see. Anything that has effects, I feel like is pretty real.
Yeah, but like it assumes a frame of reference where causality is definite.
I don't know about that.
Well, in order to value a history, you're valuing the why. Like, why are things the way they are? And then you want to be able to draw a cause and effect relationship between stuff that was and stuff that is, so you can figure out what will be, so you can feel safe at night. but you can't. You can just have that belief, but there's no, like, that doesn't give you any guarantees. It just gives you an idea of what the pattern might be.
Yeah.
Pattern doesn't is under no obligation to conform.
We have an expert in patterns with us, especially patterns, that might give clues into
Really
how
long
people
patterns.
grow and change. I mean, an organism at large will have patterns like a heartbeat. It'll have all sorts of things.
Mhm.
And we say things like history repeats itself, but then we are powerless to do anything about it.
Are we? I don't know. It seems like we may not be. It seems like we get to choose. But
Mhm.
I'm saying it seems that way because maybe we don't get to choose what we choose.
I mean, you're the math guy. You let us know about patterns.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like this we as an organism,
Mhm,
individual organism,
mhm.
the biologist would say it serves us to have a memory, right?
Mhm.
Um, and without a memory, you wouldn't have a personal history, which is the narrative you tell yourself about yourself, I guess, if you want. And without a personal history, you can't have a community history, a family history. It's, these kinds of things. And recently, I watched a video about a gentleman who could not remember more than 7 seconds or so
Mm.
at a time. And probably that's where this question originated, because I got to thinking, what if I lived where I could, this video is creepy, kind of AF, in a
Mhm.
lot of ways for me. He always meets people for the first time, et cetera. It's very, I'll post it in our little private treasure trove. It's captivating to watch.
Hmm.
And it really screwed me up. Because here's this organism that exists regardless of the existence of its history.
Mhm.
It's a
Does
very
Yeah,
that change
interesting way
his
to
level
say
of consciousness?
I would say, I mean, what comes up for me is that's will holding it together, really, just moment to moment. That's it's a something. There's some sort of meeting point at the inner and outer where the urge to keep going keeps it going, like the choice to keep going keeps it going, and the memory of that. And it's like, oh yeah, I remember being this. This is familiar. I know what's going to happen.
Yes. Um, I do have the documentary here. Um,
Hmm.
just to give you an idea of what I'm talking about, I think maybe we should just play a few seconds of it. Can we
Okay,
do
if
that?
you have an apropos few seconds, sure.
I'll go ahead and share my screen after I get it set up here. When that gets enabled.
Oh, haha, that's my job. Not bad. Multiple share. There we go. Does that work?
Cool. Okay, just a couple seconds. You should. I hope you're able to hear it, and if not, we'll try this some other way, some other day. But you know, if you can't hear it, signal at me.
Sure.
I'll bring this up.
It looks about right.
Clive Waring has one of the worst cases of amnesia in the world.
I know it's like we did now. Day and night, the same brain. No difference between dreams and anything like that. No senses at all. The brain has been totally inactive. No dreams and no thoughts of any kind whatever.
Clive was a renowned conductor living in London when he was struck down by a virus in 1985. Parts of his brain were completely destroyed, including his memory. However, his ability to play music is unaffected.
Do you feel different when you play music?
I've never heard a note since I've been ill. I don't know what it's like to play music. Maybe unconscious.
You played us some music about 2 minutes ago.
Not known to me. Total unknown. I've never heard a note yet.
All right.
Fuck me.
um,
Wow.
so yeah, that already just
That's-
that's right there at the beginning, and kind of really messes me up already to hear
Whoa.
another
Whoa.
human being say that. You know, to
Fuck.
play music and then say I have no idea what you're talking about.
I've never heard anything since I got sick. What in wow.
Yeah. We'll make that available in the section below so you can go watch it yourself.
Yeah.
It's available on YouTube.
Holy moly. I'm
I
still
think-
like reeling from that. Just give me a second. Jesus fucking Christ. Wow. Fuck. Well, that's great. I'm so grateful for that knowledge, man. Holy shit. I mean, even on my worst day, like even in the days where it's like I can't like get out of bed,
Mhm.
it's still better than that.
Yeah.
Whoa. Damn. Oh,
It of course gets a little bit more interesting as it goes into his relationships, especially with his wife.
Does he comment on his quality of life?
oh man.
He appears to me to be almost completely obsessed with with his condition. And so he kind of, at this point when they shoot the video, it seems he's just kind of stoically accepted this, but there were moments in the video showing past tapings of him having a very hard time with things. So by the time they did record this, he had kind of almost zombie, you know, he's just being propelled forward, just I figure he's miserable the way he talks. He sounds miserable.
Yeah, yeah. So I'm led to believe that the function of memory gives us a sense of fulfillment in life, or a sense of an enrichment, right? Like that.
Purpose even.
Well, then it starts to go. Then all these things are possible. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Although in some sense that is the goal of of the contemplative project to just toss it all out.
I thought it was super interesting that he could play music.
Yeah, right. Yes,
Um,
incredible. I mean, it makes a kind of sense to me because whatever is in, using a computer analogy, whatever's stored in his 7 seconds of RAM, right?
Yeah.
That's not in the muscle tissue. Like
no.
all of this is neuronal tissue. This is all like there's neurons all over it, like it learns that stuff the same way anything else does. Any other part of your body learns what it's like to do a thing. And it will repeat those patterns, because we're pattern recognizing generators. But I think that it's fascinating that somebody can be so cut off from one faculty and retain the ability to do what he just did.
I would be really, since the universe has patterns, since the stars have patterns, since the planets have patterns,
Mhm.
remembering these patterns, noticing these patterns, putting these patterns together into a narrative. There's a cat. And constructing that narrative to suit ourselves. Is that a good definition of history?
It's certainly one that can be applied to our culture. Or like,
And
like,
yeah.
okay, sorry, go ahead.
Well, this all got sparked when we were learning about how Greek statues were painted and Roman statues weren't because they were faded out by the time the Romans painted them, right? So I guess within that context, right, like how quickly these things fade out and we reconstruct them to suit ourselves is what I mean. Sorry, I didn't interrupt you. I just thought that wasn't kind of super clear.
History itself is a morphogenic field. It is cultural. It's like a good example of this is RuPaul's Drag Race and their term and their use of the word herstory, which I'm not sure if it actually came from the show, for probably it's just from gay culture. Hi, Duke. But herstory would be the morphogenic field of how woman has, done her thing. Whereas history is this conquering narrative of sorts.
Right.
There's all sorts of histories.
Like the people's history of the United States versus what we were taught in school or whatever it is.
Sure. Yeah.
In some sense, but very specific towards a community in some sense, yeah.
Yeah, a lot of histories have been propaganda campaigns that landed.
Yeah.
Or full-on appropriation of one kind or another. I mean, there's a lot of that, it's and some histories are told purely as allegory. And it's really difficult to separate what is, what contains a mythologized or fictionalized component and what doesn't, what, like,
Yeah.
how much do you trust stories about Atlantis? It's
Depends
like,
on the teller.
right. If you're reading it in Pliny, right? And Pliny is talking about this giant civilization that sank.
Yes.
And that's a guy who's has no reason to fabricate something.
Plato gave an exact date.
Yeah.
Or, well, approximate, but geez, exact in terms of Plato. Come on.
Yeah. Yeah. But that's the thing, right? So it's like, okay, well, should we be looking for this thing? Are they talking about the half of Crete that fell off? Like, is that what they're talking about? Because it could be. Or are they talking about like some chunk of Iceland that sank and there's a huge or was swallowed up by, I don't know, the melting of the ice age, right?
Yeah.
Like, who knows?
Who does know, right? Like what really happened? What are we told happened? Um, and I guess we get hung up in society about what happened. Like, oh, that happened. Like, well, no, that happened.
Well, yeah, what evidence do you accept, right? Like that's also a big part of the puzzle. Like, what's your threshold? Like, is
Well,
something good
okay,
enough?
so history is or isn't real. Probably doesn't look as real. And if you want to talk about like, all right, can you bottle it up and sell it?
Mhm.
Yeah.
It's probably at least as real as all the other things we experience. Then the question is, does it matter if it's seen to be real or not?
I mean, to me, I guess to the extent that you attach meaning to it.
You could be talking about magic right now. You could be talking about fairies and shit.
I don't know that history is distinct from magic as something that crafts the narrative field. Like,
Yeah, fairies are a large part of my view on history.
you know, I think
It does blur the lines.
yeah, revisionism is really powerful. You know, it's something that any authoritarian culture seeks to do is rewrite history books.
Is there anything that's not revisionist?
Anything that's not, yeah, a first-hand account is not revisionist. Maybe
Well,
a second-hand account, but
I don't know. What does that mean? Like if we're watching something happen in a field,
hmm,
all three of us, right?
yeah, there's still an interpretation going on.
From different, sure, like we have three perspectives.
Yes, but it's not a revision, it's just a vision.
Well, then we got to get together and we're like, did you see that? Like, yeah, I saw that. And then is there an agreement or disagreement? Well, let's suppose there's a slight disagreement.
Okay.
But you're like, I know what I saw. That moment of compromise says something about our values as individuals. It says something about our motivations. The histories that we choose say more about us than right now than what they tell us about us in the future.
Yes. Okay. All right, I understand what you're saying.
And so in that sense, it's a mirror.
Right.
We engage in presentism even if we're really smart.
Yeah, so I mean, it's always a consciousness looking at itself, right? It's turtles all the way down. It's interesting that in order to have meaning, we have to have this kind of history, and in order to have a history, you have to attach a meaning to things.
Mhm. I thought that was like a build up to a lot more.
No, I wish it were. It's just that interests me right now. I mean, we could. How far could we take it? Like they're not. So anything that seems to be diametrically in opposition, dynamically like that, is always part of a whole. I mean, I get it's all one whole, sure, but you know,
Mhm.
how do we see those two things, meaning and history, as the same thing?
I think you said it in the question there, actually, now that I'm,
Hmm.
because for something to be real, correct me, um, from a mathematical perspective, doesn't there need to be 2 points of reference in order for information to come about? So there's like even the bare minimum of framework for the bare minimum concept has to have a reference point perspective and like two perspectives essentially.
Mhm.
So
Mhm.
what that tells me is
Yeah.
there is nothing until there is anything, right? There's always going to be at least 2 points of perspective, or 2 points of perspective to create data. And at that point you're working with a framework. At that point it's a meta structure.
Right.
Yes.
Conceptuality gives birth to division. There. As soon as soon as you have an object and a subject,
Sure, there you go. Yeah, two perspectives.
you split the whole into two in order to, exactly as you said, build information, like inform it, give it form.
I now understand the latest Bjork video completely. So that's good. Completely. I didn't get it until just now. Yeah, so these stories we tell ourselves, they become important as ourselves.
Mhm.
Right? The accumulation of such, the boundary, the leading edge of your history is your ego, isn't it?
Begins with I, right? I am.
Yeah.
So
Or me. We could decide on which one is the one you want. I don't know. I tend to think me is my ego. It sounds like I'm getting more of it. Mine.
I am universal. You can do that too.
yeah.
And not have to change.
So as these perspectives construct reality, right? And it changes as through time, as different consensus gets built, and it's not hard then to just see the entire organism really as a dynamic, growing, changing creature with different types of psychological development.
Yeah.
But then I have to wonder, if there's this one, wasn't there another one, maybe two?
Yeah.
I gotta wonder, we have the younger Dryas we talked about last time. Like, was there another kind of human organism with this kind of complexity before hovering
There's
around?
another universal organism with this much complexity.
Sure, yeah.
Yes. And, ever onwards, Excelsior.
Yeah. I want, is it is it a spectrum, you think? Like, is it continuous, or is there?
Yeah, no, it's ever changing too. It
Yeah.
is.
Yeah.
Well, I don't know, I tripped myself out with that one, but it has a lot of texture. I don't know. I'm getting all sorts of there's many senses going on there. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm losing myself to it. Reorient me. Recrystallize this.
Well, I think we kind of thought we were thinking about the function of meaning and history, and how one served the other and how the other served the one. And whether or not, of course, they were just wrapped up into one little nugget that we could, you know, use in a
So
magical way.
yeah, so I'm actually really curious to know if I can have purpose without having history, without relating myself through or to histories. Like the universal I. Because it would be hard. It would still require meaning of, oh, I have no history and I'm doing it on my own, or whatever. It would still require a meaning that was based on perhaps not having, I don't know.
Yeah. And of course, it brings time into it when you put it that way.
It's what? Sorry, it's
It
time.
brings time into it as well. It just, it like we're constructing these somehow linearly from start to finish, say, but we wouldn't have to do that. And this experience seems to be playing out. And so if there's a purpose, is it connected to that playing out? Is it connected to how it's playing out? Can you change the way things play out to change your purpose? These are all the fundamental questions. And they just all come from asking yourself, like, well, what do I remember? And did that really happen? Do I care? I guess is the third question.
Yeah. Because it could happen that you are reconstructed like every Planck second
Mm-hmm.
from scratch with all your memories completely reconstructed because they blew up a second ago
Mm-hmm.
and the appearance shifted and now it's different and now it's different again. And we seem to have a retention pattern. Like something like information comes in and doesn't leave,
Yeah.
which is
That's a tough one, isn't it? Yeah.
that's profoundly strange, right? It seems like sense information doesn't leave except through that one stream that we can feel like we sense sometimes when we're,
I think you answered it in what you just said too. It's what you care about.
mm-hmm.
And care could be positive or negative things that you need to remember. You care about. You care about everything you remember. But then I hear myself say that. I'm like, Crash, do you not care about the things you don't remember? Because every time I hang out with my friends, they remind me of shit that I have done that sounds like fun. And I'm like, that, like that sounds really fun. And I was there. Like, that sucks that I don't remember. I should care about.
Yeah. On the flip side, if you remembered everything, that'd be horrible.
It can be sometimes, yeah. Crisp memories can be really upsetting.
Yeah, I used to have a really good memory until I stopped caring so much.
Mm.
Now, can you elaborate on that?
I think I used to be a lot. Well, I don't think. I'm just going to be straight. I used to be terrified. Okay. I'm terrified of people. And I used to be in situations regularly where I would have to be a person that I wasn't.
Mm.
And in order to maintain that reality from second to second, that meant that I had to have a running history of whatever it is that role cared about, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And I paid a lot of attention to that so that life might continue. But I've since been disillusioned of that idea of life being rewarding in that sense and found other rewards. And so that kind of attention to that detail has just kind of gone by the wayside, and I don't remember as much as a consequence. It could be some age too, I'm not sure. I'm not super old, but I'm not young.
Mm-hmm.
You're probably experiencing a Uranus opposition.
Explain that a little bit. What do you mean by Uranus opposition?
There are the slowest outer planets
Mhm.
make some pretty impactful aspects midlife. So like the midlife crisis is like, known by us all, and
Mhm.
some of us kind of feel like it's due to things like Pluto squares. And
Yeah.
yeah.
Or the great conjunction of Jupiter and Saturn and Pluto on your friggin' birthday. On one of your 20-year cycles, astrologically, the most important life-changing ones there are. That's what happened to me, just to have a little personal history. That's my connection to astrology was I first started paying a really close attention when it when it occurred to me that this great conjunction that was coming up might be personally involved in my life.
Nice. You are definitely smack in your Uranus opposition.
Oh, I see. Well, there you go. It makes perfect sense then what I'm doing.
All the things you need to know. Now
I'm
there's
going to
nothing
use
more-
that as a helpful tool because today I've been a little nervous about being unemployed, because
You're so cute.
I've been such a wonderful little capitalist cog for my whole life, and I've never not had a job. Never. So I just need to take a few breaths, but that's a history you see that I need to change.
Mm.
A lot of people are looking at me and shaking their head, but it's something that has to be done.
I really love not having a job, and I really love working. Like,
Yeah.
fuck a job.
I don't want a job, but I want to do things. Yeah, but I like to do things. And there are things that I'm good at. Yeah, it's an interesting thing. Back to history, these repetitive things that happen in our history. These 20-year cycles, for example, that I was keened on to last year or the year before. 2019 is when I started paying attention to that. I don't know what year it is now, but that was when that was. And you take these deep time experiments, right? Like, what was life like 26,000 years ago? Why are you thinking about that? Well, you see these kinds of conjunctions with this here and that there. They only happen every 12,500 years, you see, and then blah, blah, et cetera, et cetera. Right? And you start to correlate them with quote unquote history.
Mm.
This is when they say agriculture was invented during a great conjunction period. This is when they say art was kind of first discovered in caves, and another one. This is when settlements happened, and it keeps these cycles, these these
You're discussing the ingresses of new ages through the
yes,
the
yeah,
Grand Conjunction happens every 20 years.
yeah.
And there's so many layers in between.
It could even be a second in another clock face, right? That we're not even paying attention to.
Yes, I like thinking like that. They're like our greatest conception of time is the most microscopic conception of time in the whatever next. But I digress.
Yeah, the next level up. I get it though.
No, and we've talked about that before, where you see the entire human dragon as one organism.
I could go in many directions with that.
Yeah.
And I never remember what I say. This is why we record now.
Yeah, but that's the fun part. No, we were at one point we were talking about how all the features of humanity, if you looked at it, right, if you just took humanity and just zoomed out as far as you could, and saw each human as one little line, right, that you could trace back, and then the shape of that organism as it went down through its evolutionary history until it's a single cell, right? And the variations and the explorations of that organism would create something that's, all of our DNA is expressed around us, trees share our DNA, monkey, like all these organisms have different genes activated, and it's all one set of genes.
Dragon.
Well, and that begs the question, since that's interesting, right? Because what is a gene? It's a what's
that?
that?
A memory.
It's a memory. It's a history.
Yeah.
Genetic memory, a material memory.
It's a history of what you've encountered as a biological creature.
Yep.
Like a
Um,
little tablet you write down on, like, oh shit, don't eat that.
Yep. Yep. We extend those feelers out and see what, and you know, when one of us eats shit really hard, we tend to remember.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
yeah, like, okay, yeah, we should not do that again.
So then let's discuss the nuanced differences, if there are any, between like memory from the chthonic realm, the mundane reality, or and slash the eternal realm, like the you know.
We could say the Akashic record. We could say what?
I feel more esoteric than that, or not. That's not using the word right.
Right. No, I think esoteric is good. It's because we're bringing it out into the open, right? And if it were not esoteric, it would be right on the tip of your tongue.
Sure, but I mean like the eternal versus the mundane,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Like, and I'm giving the mundane to dragon.
Mhm.
I think when we think of dragon, we spiritualize it and we eternalize dragon as the eternal. But
Oh, I
truly,
see.
when
Yeah,
we
yeah.
think of all that, it's the mundane reality. It's
Yeah,
the
yeah.
meat and bone, right?
Yep. Mhm.
So there's memory there, and I think we call it instinct. And then there's memory that we think we're speaking of right now, I think. Yeah.
Yeah,
No, I think that's about right. Yeah, we have instincts, right? There's a ton of genetic memory. Like, I mean, I feel like I benefited from experiences my grandfather must have had that I know nothing about,
certainly.
right? Like,
Affected. I would go with affected, but yeah. Yeah.
yeah, affected. Well,
More
benefited.
neutral.
You know, there's like things where it's like, oh, these are mistakes he made that I'm not making, right? Like, there's something baked in because he gave them to my dad and then my dad gave them to me, and vice versa for, like, you know, the things that, you know, when you grow up and you get to a certain age where your parents fall out of the admiration category for one reason or another, in one category or another, and that disillusioning happens, you reflect and see a better way to be a person, right? That's part of the process of growing up, is becoming disillusioned with that, and positing a different ideal
Mhm.
in
It
contrast.
also does happen that they say, don't do that. And you're like, shit, I won't. You don't. Right? Sometimes that happens.
Sometimes that happens too,
In
yeah.
both cases, it's like it's an epigenetic force, right? It's like consciousness come to bear on how your genetics are being just, you know,
Expressed, yeah.
expressed. That's a great word for it. Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
this goes back to, oh, yeah, how to even go there. This goes back to free will versus automated conditioning. I don't know.
Right.
Um,
Is my soul Pavlovianly conditioned to repeat this?
well, and it is until a proper separation of self from womb, and many of us go to the grave without doing that, right?
Yes.
So that separation is uncomfortable, filled with rage, all of these things. And if it's not determined well properly, then we just stay at that level, and then everything is us. We have not left the wound. Everything is me. Right? Like, you have to separate esoterically
Yeah.
from the eternal womb.
So in this case, history is part of the force of being reborn.
You only history, sure, but like individually, it's potential. It's like there's a potential that you have to actually separate yourself from the collective memory to
Right.
start experiencing your own now.
Right. When you
And
can take control of your own narrative to the extent where that becomes possible.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
perhaps memory actually is a very different creature for all of us.
Hmm.
Mm. Hmm. I notice that my memory is uncomfortably sharp around areas of what I perceive as trauma. And so what is that for? I ask myself sometimes. Why hang on to that? What am I to learn about the sharpness of that memory?
Well, can it be removed?
That's the thing. I don't know that I'd want it to be removed.
Well, 'cause it's
Well,
serving a safety function. It is serving you to have that memory. You know you know what you don't want. You might not know what you want, but you know what you don't want based on your experience. And it's incredibly valuable for you to know that. So it is serving you to
Mhm.
know what to avoid, to know what to avoid mind, body, soul, to not. And it's interesting how to not, there is an incredibly crisp memory in exchange, right?
Right. And then there's also simultaneously very crisp memories of uh points of great joy, right? Or surprise.
Mm.
Let's say delight.
I think as a black hole, it's really easy for me to keep to myself.
Mhm.
And it's easy to remember things that keep me to myself. It's hard to remember trauma and then to extend yourself to another person, putting yourself in potentially a situation where you could be traumatized again.
Mm.
One perspective is that this is keeping you from being re-traumatized by keeping you out of those situations.
Mhm.
And that kind of thing has led to me kind of turtling away personally with my fear and not addressing it.
Mhm.
And so perhaps the function of that sharp memory is to serve as a beckoning to re-engage with that situation to see if it doesn't change the next time you try it.
Mm.
And it's hard, time being perceived the way that we do. It's like, what do you mean by try again? Like like I was abused by my uncle or something, or something, and that's causing. I'm not minimizing. That's fucking terrible, right? And that's something that's gonna change everything about you. But maybe things like this just keep coming up until you address them.
Mhm.
And it's just like a sliver left unattended will fester and become the most painful thing you've ever experienced. And you can't think of anything else but that sliver because it's painful. And that's why it's so sharp and crisp, because pain is really, really gets your attention.
Mhm.
So does joy. But where we are, I tend to believe joy comes from connection, from love.
Mhm.
And so where we are is kind of slanted on one side versus the other, maybe necessarily for right now. But so maybe you just notice those moments less because there are really truly less of them.
I think culturally too, we have incentives to have our traumas serve us because we're kind of living in a world where we're a bad guy unless we're a victim, and where and how we are makes us good in this culture. So sometimes it's hard to let go of what makes us good to the collective.
Mm.
That can serve us too. I do find rationalizing sensational things, if I want to dispel them, going through the mundane process of applying these kind of rationalizations. Like I don't feel good about I don't feel excited about serving certain things, so I use that as a rationality to take the emotion out of it. And then sometimes you choose not to, and then that shows you what, like it I don't know, you just keep on learning about yourself. Isn't that the point?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, if you're paying attention.
Well, that's history then. Ching.
Yeah, that's how important history is to us.
Yeah.
I mean, I felt a lot of anger because I feel like my history has been taken away from me. I'm like, why the fuck have these people dilly-dallied our fucking history? Why don't they know the family crest? Why did that get burned? What the fuck? Like, and then I meet people that are like have their like clan tattooed and shit, and I'm like, oh, that's so insert 90s term here that I can't use anymore.
Yes.
Yeah. So I don't know. It's a personal thing. But I mean, like, in order to like one to not remember something someone remembers, one would have to recreate their identity.
Yeah. That's the process.
Yeah. I think that's why I rationalize things so much. So I don't have to like recreate myself. I just deflate everything.
Yeah, and logic is also a structure that you can use to create reality ad hoc and on the fly.
Say that again, sorry.
Well, logic and logic,
Mhm.
logical thought processes, they're a machine that's used to create, say, truth or reality, kind of ad hoc as you go along, right? The process of rationalization is just basically applying a filter to the data you're given, right? And so that filter automatically becomes part of your perspective.
Yeah.
You're not really involved in the process because logic is extra ego. And so when you go through that logical filter, as you recognize that's what you're being led through, that's kind of, for me, the rationalization. It's kind of a remembrance of the implication of a logical truth from just a few femtoseconds before. And so this sequence of cause and effect is exactly like creating your own universe, like going into your mind and saying the law or logos, right? And then that creates everything for you.
Those multiple reference points, right? Like every experience you remember is a reference point for who you are. And then what you just said. And then you got to the logos, which took me for a ride, but uh can we digress to that for a second actually? What are the multiple logoses?
What does that mean?
I'm under the impression that there are more than one natural logi.
Well, I'm gonna make a mundane comparison
Okay.
and not talk in the language that's normally suited for that kind of idea, because I'm thinking about logic right now.
Excellent.
And that's kind of the same thing. So to take that analogy further, imagine our logic is based on true and false. It is or it isn't. You have a statement, and that statement's either true or it's false. It comprises different pieces, and either those pieces have true or false values, etc. And that's the filter. That's the rational filter. Is this true? Yes or no? If it is, you keep it. If not, blah. It's like a Plinko, or that Price is Right game where the things jump around and you get $100 or whatever. But it's more structured, and that structure of the Plinko board is the logic itself.
Mm-hmm.
Now imagine that instead of living on a planet that rotates so that you have a night and day, that you have instead a planet that is situated maybe kind of like the moon, so that it has kind of a twilight area, a permanent twilight area. And now, even where things are located in time is no longer, it's either there, right? It's a little bit of both. It's no longer true or false. It's like true or false, or kind of could
Liminal.
be.
Yeah,
What's that?
Liminal.
Liminal. Yeah, exactly. Precisely. And our scientific truths do not involve liminal logic. So that's how I would say the so now explode that in a fractal nature, connect me with the all, and that's the multiple logi. To me.
Yeah, no, I like that.
And that begins with mythologically, that begins with God rejecting Lucifer.
Oh yeah, okay, here we go. Lucifer being fallen light, so the eternal that is form came into form.
It lights, right? It creates contrast. It
I
says,
just woke up one day
yeah,
in this body.
just hey, let there be light, right? And as soon as you do that, well, you have contrast against what wasn't lit up before. And so now you have that true false dichotomy. And that's, in some sense, that's not real. That's not really reality. That's something.
Couple of perspectives playing out in space.
Yeah. Perspectives. It's all a trick of the light.
Yeah. It's always been my argument against, like, well, aliens will have the same math that we do. I don't have any reason to suspect that whatsoever. That doesn't make sense to me, that there would even be a similar logic. It doesn't make sense to me. So, but clearly there's a process playing out. And that process,
I think there's
dynamic.
The process playing out.
What's that?
I think there's the appearance of a process playing out.
Mm-hmm.
Whether or not there's actually anything happening, I am not certain.
It's an appearance of a process because it has movement in the mundane realm, but not in the eternal.
Yeah, it's wholeness itself. We're only ever getting
that perspective. It is that.
Yeah, it's unchanging. So what we're actually seeing is the playing out of an appearance. You know, this is finitude trying to know infinity in some sense.
I sure like to think about it as painting by numbers, because the whole thing's already drawn.
Mhm.
It's already been intellectually colored in. And perhaps the painting by numbers itself expresses a scene of movement from start to beginning or whatever, but the painter is painting in the middle. I don't know.
It's weirder than that because there's no time either. So the process isn't actually happening. It's just the appearance of I mean, it's so, I mean, the memory is what creates time.
Well,
right?
I contend that the memory is the evidence of the process.
Of the
Yeah, and I think you're just coming at you're coming at the changing world from the eternal perspective, and you're asking yourself why it's changing because you're from the eternal perspective.
Yeah, and the answer to that is because you made it change. While you're up there, that was your fault, by the way. You were the one that recoiled and snapped back.
Yeah.
You did that, and you created the abyss, right? You did all this. Sorry, there's a little bit of angry Gnosticism coming through.
Yeah, a lot of blaming. Like, yo, it's your fault. It's like, bro, you mean it's my fault?
You mean I did this to myself?
Yeah, because you thought it'd be fun.
Yeah. I'm going to eat an entire pint of ice cream now.
I low-key believe you.
Cookie dough, vegan. It's in my fridge or my freezer, so yeah, it's gonna happen.
What kind is it? The cashew coconut? Which one?
Ooh, that sounds good.
I like
Well, I don't know what Ben and Jerry's uses for their non-dairy, but I assume it tastes like oat milk to me.
Oh, yummy.
It's really, really good because it doesn't make me throw up.
That's good. In ice cream, I generally like to have ice cream that doesn't make me puke. Yeah.
Sometimes I do like to have ice cream that makes me puke.
Yeah, it's that the richness, it just doesn't, you can't compare with it. This stuff is good. Anyway, those are my plans.
Great. Well, thanks for coming and having a chat. And thanks for listening. If you have any comments, questions, if you want to throw some shade our way, I don't really care. We're not going to shade it anyway. Do what you will. Law there, and subscribe, bell, with all the things like it, because we love you.
Ring the bell.
Perfect. All right, everybody. Good night.
Babe.
Good night.